All right. You guys ready? Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Trimmer.
Here.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Here.
Mr. Wallace.
Here.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Here.
Mr. Glista.
Here. Approval of the minutes, the February 15, 2016 special meeting minutes, the February 18th special meeting minutes, work session, and regular meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Approval of the financial report, item 1. Recommend approval of the financial report for the month of February 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yep. Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 2. Recommend approval of accounts payable, payroll, and benefit expenditures for February 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 3. Recommend approval of transfers, advances, and advance returns for February 2016.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 4. Recommend approval of appropriations for February 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
I guess I jumped ahead.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
I think so.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 5. Recommend approval of an amended certificate of resources for February 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 6. Recommend approval of a summary of amounts required from general property approved by the Mahoning County Budget Commission and the Mahoning County Auditor's estimated tax rates for the next succeeding fiscal year commencing July 1, 2016 in Exhibit 1.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 7, recommend approval of the audited financial statements and audit report for fiscal year 2014-15 in Exhibit 2.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer, call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yep.
Mr.
Yes.
Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Did you want to say anything about that audit or not?
You know, I could come up with a couple words here. Within probably the last 3 weeks, had an audit exit conference with the auditor's state representatives. The district was fortunate enough to have another clean audit. That will be the 6th year in a row we've had such an audit. Thanks to all the folks in the treasurer's office who worked so hard to achieve that, as well as the staff who helped also to make that happen. So,
Thank you. We have no accounts payable under recognitions. Dr. Weingart.
We have several, and I'm happy to highlight those. Number 1, NBC team selections. First team, girls basketball, Brenna Rito. Wrestling, Ian Sharp. Second team, boys basketball, Jeremy Gorby. Girls basketball, Kaylee Manning. Wrestling, Seth Schroeder and Christian Waite. Honorable mention, boys basketball, Brett Butcher and TJ DeShields. And girls basketball, Katie Hahn and Natalie Jakowski. How'd I do? Zukowski, yep. I even practiced too, so I'll apologize to her. Wrestling, Sean Dixon and Cameron Martic. State wrestling qualifiers, Dylan Miller and Ian Sharp. Number 3, the cheerleaders and coaches for qualifying and placing 10th at the state competition. Number 4, teenagers of the month, Alliance Elks BPO number 467, Morgan Erb and Matthew Manley. Alliance Chamber of Commerce, Taylor Miller. Number 5, to the cast and crew of the Church Basement Ladies, production at the middle school. Number 6, Brian Stahara, John Zamarelli, and the students for outstanding band concerts. Number 7, Senior Lawrence Steidel for recently receiving the Young Woman with Bright Future Award, sponsored by the Youngstown YWCA. And it's my pleasure to read the names of our new inductees into the West Branch National Honor Society. We'd like to salute their advisor, Mrs. Tracy Wyatt, for a very nice Afternoon, selection process and reception. Our new members are Zoe Bailey, Courtney Banks, Josh Davidson, Kaylee Day, Amanda Dean, Zachary Dean, Madison Deffenbach, Morgan Erb, Kirsten Glista, Emma Griffith, Shay Haas, Michael Johnson, Alex Kidd, Maria McCary, Gabriella McKinley, Carly McQuilkin, Amber Mondak, Deanna Pagnucco, Bailey Pollinori, Derek Reed, Kaylin Sainer, Ian Sharp, Grace Skolash, Jenna Smith, Ashley Weber, Ronald Yarwood, and Angela Young. Thank you.
Thank you. WBEA comments? WBCEA comments? Visitors' comments, we have none. Correspondence, report to the board, none. Old business and new business. Item number 1, recommend approval of additions and corrections to the policy manual. First reading in Exhibit 3.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 2, recommend approval to request bids and prepare a public bid package for a summer paving project with areas to be paved being the high school front office parking lot, main gym stadium auditorium parking lot, and the entrance drive to those parking lots. Funding for the paving project will be from the Facilities Maintenance Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 3, recommend approval to enter an agreement with the Stark County Educational Service Center to provide audiology services for hearing impaired students from April 1, 2016 through June 3, 2016, Exhibit 4.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 4, recommend approval to discontinue the use of Paul's Taxi for transportation of a student to the Lisbon Opportunity School effective April 1, 2016, but continue to utilize Paul's Taxi on an as-needed basis for the 2015-16 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 5, recommend approval to enter an agreement with the Community Action Agency of Columbiana County, Action Rural Transit System, to provide transportation to a student to the Lisbon Opportunity School for the 2015-16 school year on an as-needed basis in Exhibit 5.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 6 is located in Exhibit 6. Recommend acceptance of gifts and donations, and we appreciate all of the gifts and donations to West Branch.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item 7, under Personnel, A, recommend approval to accept the retirement of Cindy Helms, elementary teacher, at the conclusion of the 2015-16 school year in accordance with the rehire provision in the negotiated master agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item B, recommend...
If you don't mind.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
It's all right, it's all right. I always like to, when someone retires, to do a little homework on that and report that out. Mrs. Helms teaches first grade at Knox Elementary. She has been in both of the Knox Elementary schools. She started with us in 1985 and is completing her 31st year with us. So we're glad that she's going to be around with us for a couple of years. We certainly wish her all the best and appreciate her long years of service to us.
Thank you. Item B, recommend approval for an unpaid medical leave for Kayla Bowers from March 17 through March 30, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace.
No.
Mr. Glista.
No.
Mrs. Carnegie.
No.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
No.
Mr. Trimmer.
No. Item C has been removed. Item D, recommend approval for an extended unpaid medical leave for Allison Berkey from April 15th, 2016 to April 29th, 2016.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mrs. Carnegie.
No.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
No.
Mr. Wallace.
No.
Mr. Glista.
No.
Mr. Trimmer.
No. Item E, recommend approval for unpaid leave request for Mike Helm on March 4, 2016.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
No.
Mr. Wallace.
No.
Mr. Glista.
No.
Mrs. Carnegie.
No.
Mr. Trimmer.
No. Item F, recommend approval for unpaid leave request for Megan Woods on March 24, 2016.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Wallace.
No.
Mr. Glista.
No.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Nope.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
No.
Mr. Trimmer.
No. Item G, recommend approval to compensate title tutors at their daily rate of pay when they are required to substitute.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mr. Glista.
No.
Yes.
Or yes. I'm in the wrong spot. I'm on a no mode right now.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs.
Word
McLaughlin.
that one.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr.
You can say
Trimmer.
no if you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Item H, recommend approval to employ the following as a certificated substitutes for the 2015-16 school year pending certification. Anthony Sluice and Matthew Baxter.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes.
Yes.
Item I, recommend approval to employ the following as classified substitutes for the 2015-16 school year pending certification. Luann Geiger, Lisa Berger, Nick Bryan, and Patricia Hoffman.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item J, recommend approval to accept the resignation of Robert McCoskey as athletic director at the conclusion of the 2015-16 school year.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Dr. Weingart.
Do we have enough time here? Mr. McCoskey started with West Branch Local Schools back in 1973, and he has worked for us for 43 years in a variety of capacities. He was a longtime business education teacher. He was a driver's education teacher, a longtime coach, faculty manager, and most recently as athletic director. Certainly somebody who did not grow up here, but adopted West Branch and has been a real asset to the school and to the community. We salute him and wish him all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Item K, recommend approval to accept the resignation of Allison Krepko as assistant girls track coach for the 2015-16 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item L, recommend approval to accept the resignation of Emily Campbell as assistant boys track coach for the 2015-16 school year.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item M, recommend approval to accept the resignation of Chad Butcher as middle school boys track coach for the 2015-16 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item N, recommend approval to grant the following supplemental contracts for the 2015-16 school year as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Item O, recommend approval to accept the retirement of Gayla Withrick as treasurer's assistant cashier at the conclusion of the 2015-16 school year.
So moved. Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista.
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie.
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer.
Yes. Dr. Weingart.
Mrs. Withrick has been with us since 1996, and she's just recently completed her 20th year. And anybody who's been in the high school cafeteria for the last 20 years knows her smiling face and a great personality, and she's been a real asset to the district, been a good person for the district, grew up around here, and we wish her all the best as she heads into retirement.
Yeah, I would like to echo, I'm sure she was very much appreciated by all the young kids that have worked through that cafeteria, the cash register next to her, and also the kids that came through the line. So I wish her well. So
All right, thank you. Item P, recommend approval to pay the administrative rate of $30 per hour to Sarah Jones as administrator for the Success by Six 2016 summer program.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item Q, recommend approval to pay the administrative rate $30 per hour to Vanessa Evans as the summer school Title I coordinator.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item R, recommend approval of the professional leave superintendent's assignments as requests in Exhibit 7.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes, we have three items, under the addendum, under new business. Item number 1, recommend approval of a quitclaim bill of sale entered into by and between Time Warner Cable Midwest LLC, doing business as Time Warner Cable, the seller, a Delaware limited liability company, and West Branch Local School District, the purchaser, for the conveyance of personal property collectively called the Tower at no fee charged by seller to purchaser in Exhibit 1A.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item 2, recommend approval of a quitclaim deed entered into by and between Time Warner Cable Midwest LLC, a Delaware limited liability company doing business as Time Warner Cable, the grantor, for valuable consideration paid grants West Branch Local School District, the grantee, certain real property parcels listed in Exhibit 2A.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes. Item.
Can I just say something here?
Sure.
A little out of character, but these may look like kind of complicated items on an addendum, and you wonder what's going on. But I want to thank Victor Trimmer, Larry Stuckey, Dan Telsrow, and his staff, and also Sherry Malloy. This represents a couple of years of trying to unravel a lot of red tape in order to do this. At the end of the day, the Time Warner is gifting to the district a tower which we use for our 25 buses that are out on the road. And if we did not have that tower to be able to bounce the signals off of that, we wouldn't be able to communicate with the radios that we do have here. And I'm not even sure I've done it even remote justice to everything that had to go along, from the technical aspects that Victor and Sherry were able to work with, to all of the legalities that we were there to do to work out. So it's ours now, and now we've got another, maybe 20 square feet to mow. But it's okay.
You know, I wanted to mention, we had a little glitch in this thing with the Time Warner person we were working with a couple of years back leaving, and then this got resurrected pretty recently. I want to recognize Denise for the effort that she did with working with legal counsel and working with them to bring this thing, that actually brought it to the finish line.
Yep.
So,
Item 3, recommend approval to request bids and prepare public bid package for the purchase of kitchen equipment for each of the school district kitchens. Funding for this purchase will be provided by the Food Services Fund.
So moved.
Second.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes, at this time, I'd like to have a motion to enter into executive session to consider the employment of a public official with no action will be taken.
I make a motion to go into executive session.
I second it.
Treasurer call the roll, please.
Mr. Glista?
Yes.
Mrs. Carnegie?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Trimmer?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, no, I wanted to say
Softball
no.
one, an extra inning. Good one.